now for roughly about three and more years. So all right, so let me first just give a brief introduction of where I'm now, my university in Northeastern. So this is a Google map I just explored the other day. So we are here in the downtown Boston area. And if you are familiar with Boston, you know it's possibly one of the best educational place in the world. So we are pretty much close. We are very close to Harvard University, MIT, Boston University. A lot of great neighbors. Other universities like BC, I believe is. Let me just use my laser pointer. Whoops. BC, I believe is here. And then Brandeis University is also on the west. So there's a lot of great neighbors. If you belong to a material community, MRS Fall takes place every year here. So if you come and visit, just you feel free to pay me a visit, and I can guide you through the neighborhood. It's a very nice neighborhood. So now modern Northeastern University. This university is now a little bit more than 100 years old, but in the modern time, it really evolves from a basic teaching university to a very research-focused university. So now the university stands number 31 in grad engineering school, 49 national university, and always the best co-op internship university in the United States. Of course, now the university or we are not really too focused on this ranking. It's just a number, but now we're really hoping to construct this university towards a very research-focused place. So now my lab here, we started in January last year. So now we just had our 1 year anniversary. So we have a broad interest in, as Bahong introduced, in both theory and the experiment of a broad area of a broad group of materials, and mostly soft materials, but also other functional materials. So we are interested in, I think, nearly all the different aspects of mechanical behavior of materials with other physical coupling. And then I think one of our strengths is we can really synthesize these materials and fabricate the materials ourselves. And we can test and characterize the material ourselves, and then we can compare to the modeling developed. So here's our lab. It was pretty empty in the beginning with the help of two of my great students. Now I think it's pretty busy and even a little bit messy. So that's a good thing. Now, let me just, so before I start, I just want to advertise we have two openings. We currently have one PhD opening for fall 2022 in mechanics and or materials, and the postdoc opening immediately. And you can see the flyer on my website. Now, let me get started. So the motivation for this talk is really an ongoing paradigm shift, or even a new paradigm, I think, in materials development. So I just want to share the very similar opinion coming from different places. But let me tell you that this point. So one is about the idea of Internet of Materials. This came very nicely from Professor Gregory Abode, who is currently the Dean of College of Engineering at Northeastern. The other idea is called physical intelligence from Professor Mendicity at Max Planck Institute. And here are two links. So this is a link you can just Google on YouTube on these two topics. This is a link of one lecture about Internet of Materials. This one is a link, an EML webinar about physical intelligence. So Gregory is a computer scientist, so he is more focused on the computation part aspect of these materials. Whereas I think Professor City focused more on the material development and how to make them functional of materials. So the overall idea I got from these two different places is quite similar. So imagine now we can develop a material which can adapt to very complex environments, and more importantly, it can sense, actuate, and analysis itself without any central computing. So you don't need a CPU, but rather really based on the material itself, it can be self-sustainable and it can compute. So it can compute itself, and there's no local energy storage. So you get energy supply from somewhere else, or you can even generate energy itself. For example, the triboelectrics. So now today, one aspect in this idea, this paradigm, is about actuation. And I really want to talk about this so-called untethered actuation. Basically, the idea you don't have any wires connected to the robot or material, but rather using external stimuli to actuate a material or a robot. So here's a few examples. There's based on the mechanism. This is the thermal actuation. So this robot arm is built by ship memory polymer, and it can deform in hot water or warm water and can make this move by Professor Chiara Dairoy at Caltech. And this is by Professor Shenhe Zhao from MIT. You can use magnetic field to deform very complex shaped materials. And also photo, especially photothermal. So the idea is this guy, these bands in this tensegrity robot is made by a liquid crystal elastomer, which can deform when it's heated up. So you shine a light on this, and the temperature of these materials increase, so it shrinks, and then this tensegrity robot can be programmed to move in the path. So this is by Professor Shengqiang Zhao from UC San Diego. Now, beyond all of these, rather, I'd like to talk about a different mechanism, which is called photochemical. And you will immediately see why we are interested in this mechanism. Now, it's pretty attractive too. So let's start with the molecule we are interested in. So a representative model molecule for this mechanism is called azobenzene. So it's a photomechanical molecule. When it's in its ground state or without any actuation activation, it's in the so-called trans state. So the molecular shape looks like this. So now if you shine a light with a given wavelength, this molecule can actually decrease its molecular length, becomes kinked, and becomes a cis shape. And this cis shape, depending on the specific molecular design, it can be permanent, or it can decay with with temperature, or it can even change back to the trans state when you shine a light of a different wavelength. So this is a very interesting molecule. Now, the mechanism is really, like I said, the trans state in the electronic energy, it stays in the lower energy state. When you shine a light, it absorbs the photon in an excited state, and depending on some statistics, depending on the energy landscape, it goes back to either trans or cis. Of course, this is a double well energy landscape. So some molecules will stay in the cis unless there's a thermal fluctuation and the relaxation, right? So why are we interested in this? This is the mechanism. If I put some numbers, okay, so this is based on a real experiment and some simulation modeling. So if I put in some numbers, what you can find out is, in principle, if you have a material in the molecular level and you follow a loop of this actuation, and the area of this loop, of course, is the mechanical work output you can generate, then the specific work, which is the work density in terms of volume, is very high, is extremely high, 10 to 8 joule per meter cube. This is arguably the highest work output you can find in any actuator. But of course, this is ideal. This is in the molecular length scale, okay? Thermodynamic efficiency is 10%. Now, it's not bad at all. And also, imagine you have a lot of light, then this efficiency really doesn't matter too much. The specific work output is very high for this material. Then the idea from scientists in recent years is now like, now I have this powerful model. Sorry, I will experience some issue with my headset, but it's fine. I have some powerful molecule. Now, one way, very simple, naive way is, now what if I can just assemble all these molecules into a highly stacked periodic structure, right? So this will give you a molecular crystal. And then hopefully if I shine a light, I can have some phase transformation, and then this crystal can change its shape and can do some work, okay? On the other hand, I can also embed this molecule into a polymer structure. And then if I change the shape, shine a light, I change the shape of this yellow molecule, which is the azobenzene, and then these kinked shape can hopefully disturb this whole molecular structure, and this polymer can now change its shape as well. So this shape change in reality can be much, much larger than this crystal. But on the other hand, this crystal can do probably larger work than this polymer, because polymers are relatively softer in their modulus. Okay, so now this is a picture designed by Chris Bardeen's group in chemistry at UC Riverside. So what they did is, now they made these crystals, and then they can embed these crystals into a template, so such that they shine a light, this template can change its shape and really did some large work. They demonstrated in their papers. And liquid crystal, these so-called liquid crystal polymer network, if you shine a light at the macro scale, it can also deform and have some very interesting shape morphing and work output. So I will give you some examples later. Now, looking at that picture, now we see that this is really a three-way coupling. I would call it photomechanical coupling. So you have light propagation in the material, you have shape change and stress induced. So you have mechanics, and then there's photo reaction, right? So we just talk about cis and trans. These are a few examples in recent years. So mainly, I would say mainly focus on the coupling between mechanics and light propagation. So basically what's going on, let me show you the example first. So you see a beam and you shine a light. This beam can now self-oscillate and flap, okay? Basically because when it flaps, you have constant change of the light shining surface on these two surfaces, and then it just keeps oscillating because you can only actuate one of the surfaces. So this is beam bending. This is one other example. You shine a light on this rolling beam or strip, it can self-rolling, okay? Now, a third example is also flapping beam, but now the cute idea, they published it in Nature, is that if I add some very interesting external geometric constraint, and then this light source here, I don't need to move that, but this beam can self-move itself. Okay, so this is a very interesting demonstration. So all of these you see is an interplay between light and mechanics, or in particular geometry, right? So all of them are involving beam plate bending. Basically, it means that when you have a material, you shine a light on it, the light can only penetrate a very finite depth of this material. So you only actuate a very thin layer of the material. Then from mechanics of material, we know that you can only generate a beam bending in this case, right? Now, but there's a challenge currently if we want to further develop this material. So if we look at the single molecule level, I've already shown you people demonstrated in research that there is a very high specific work output. But looking at the bulk material we just demonstrated, we just shown, this is So this is an example published earlier by Akeda on this so-called light motor. Okay, so you shine a light, this motor can now rotate. You can calculate the specific work is like 4 or 5 at least order of magnitude lower, and the efficiency is much, much lower. So our question is, since there's a huge gap between the nanoscale and the macroscale performances, what is going on here? So that's the topic of today. So let's revisit this picture of length scale. So basically, there's a big, big gap between here and here. So then, of course, the next straightforward question is what's going on here? That's what I call mesoscale photomechanical coupling. So it adds some scale that bridges these two length scales. So we basically want to, today I basically want to focus on a specific aspect of this triangle, the coupling between mechanics and photoreaction. And we want to ask, how does mechanics interplay with photo reaction? Fundamentally, what's the coupling, what's the mechanisms involved? And how does this interplay affect the photomechanical performance? So there's some aspect for folks who are in the field, especially liquid crystal polymer. I have to say there's some aspect I won't talk about because we haven't worked on that too much today, which is the viscoelasticity of this material. So that's not considered. And I have to say that's a big, big problem or a part of piece of work that many great folks have been working on. So that's not the focus, but rather the photomechanics, especially elasticity. Now, I want to introduce to you what we have investigated in 3 materials, basically spanning through this molecular order. So I'm going to talk about a molecular crystal, a semicrystalline polymer, and finally a liquid crystal elastomer, which is the lowest molecular order. And all these are theoretical modeling work, and they are all based on this simple azobenzene molecule, but you will see that they are pretty much generic, so we are not limited to a single molecular structure, okay? Now, let me start with this molecular crystal. I've shown you that this is a very straightforward thought, right? You just assemble all of these, stack them together, and hopefully you form a crystal. It can generate some very large work output. Not as large as single molecule, but still decently large. So Christopher Bardeen, our collaborator at UC Riverside, has a lot of beautiful work on this, so you can take a look. Now, but in reality, it's actually not that simple. So here's a video where you shine a light on such kind of crystal. Now, it's very fast, but you can probably see that if I shine a light, this crystal fractures, right? Violently fracture. But we can also see from literature that they don't always fracture. So this is another material, a kind of molecular crystal, but well, this is an example of thermal actuation. So you see that when I change the temperature, there seems to be a phase transformation, and there's a front of this propagating in the material, but the material didn't fracture, right? So here's another example. So this guy here is probably a needle of a thermal needle, and then you can see clearly the phase front propagating in the material, right? And this phase transformation is even reversible, right? So a very recent example from Professor Dick James' group at the University of Minnesota also show that you can see clearly a phase front during this phase transformation. I believe this is a ceramic. Okay. So now then the question is very relevant. Can we understand this and can we design this? So another interesting observation in this azobenzene is now If I build a self-assembly monolayer on the substrate using these azobenzene, you can clearly see there's some interesting periodic microstructure of these collective trans and cis switching, either using light or using electron switching. So these are the different directions of these azobenzene cis, and these both trans and cis, you can see different patterns. So these are the two phenomena. Then we have these two questions. Why do fracture happens and what governs the microstructures? So what we're going to do is we're going to couple the photoreaction based on that energy landscape I just shown you, and then the mechanics based on some classical result. So we're going to use a very simple model, Ising model or Ising model. It's a lattice model usually run by Monte Carlo simulation. It's in statistical mechanics studying the phase transformation, both kinetics and thermodynamics of this different phase transition. Now, here we want to use rather instead a driven Ising model. So I have a constant light source which constantly pump energy inside and drive the system out of the thermodynamic equilibrium. So each of these element can represent a single molecule of trans or cis or a group of same molecules, okay? So the single molecule energy landscape, I will use this inspiration from the atomic study. And then I can write the total Hamiltonian of this system. This is a classical Ising model in many textbooks. So it has a nearest neighbor interaction, and it's a minus and J is positive. That means neighbor and neighbor really wants to stay with each other rather than be opposite. Okay, so they like to stay with each other in the same state. So trans likes trans, cis likes cis. So I have an external field by H. If H is positive, you can prove that it has a preference energetically of trans, which corresponds to here. But moreover, I will add an additional elasticity term, which I will talk to you later about this. So algorithm, I have a metropolis Monte Carlo algorithm based on model thermal relaxation. This is classical. Now I add a photoreaction, which is the driving force, drive this system away from the equilibrium. Now, light intensity, you can also define, it's basically in the simulation, it's the number of events, the ratio of number of events between these two processes. And you can furthermore theoretically derive this forward reaction rate. Okay, I don't have time to talk in detail. You can refer to our paper, which is published. So let's first look at a very simple case, solution versus a solid. So here I don't I don't include any sophisticated elasticity, okay, or mechanics. I'm basically only considering the nearest neighbor interaction, okay? So here's the result. This is the kinetics. I'm recording the ratio of cis. So initially I have no cis. So remember, trans is in the ground state. Trans is lower energy. So initially there's all trans. Now I shine a light of a constant intensity and I just wait, okay? So this is a solution where I don't have any interaction or the interaction is very small. You can see very quickly it reaches equilibrium, and this is really just the first order kinetics. Nothing special, nothing surprising. In the solid, however, it becomes pretty much slower, and I will have random islands, but later on I will have some nucleation and growth. So let me first fast forward this. You can see clearly you have a nucleation growth. So, and recording this, you can have a very sigmoidal-like curve or S-shaped curve. So when our collaborator in chemistry foresaw this, they were very happy about this, and there's some very nice experimental validation of this. But since I'm teaching Introduction to Material Science, I have to admit that this is also nothing too special or surprising in solid state phase transformation, right? So in textbook, we already know if it's solid state phase transition, it is a S-shaped curve, really because of the interaction. Neighbors like neighbors, why the hell do I need to flip, right? It has to take quite some efforts or time for me to form a big enough nucleus, right? So photostationary state is nothing too much special either. So in solution, you have a very nice first order reaction kinetics. In fact, you can actually analytically solve this problem, and this is the solid line, which agrees pretty well. Well, in solid, you do see a first order phase transition. There's a jump or discontinuity of the order parameter here, which is the cis ratio. So initially, neighbors like neighbors, so they don't want to flip. They either flip all or they don't flip, right? So this is the idea. Now is something more interesting. So imagine in a crystal, I have two domains. And this is really by the Eshelby inclusion, classical problem, right? But now in photomechanics, imagine I have two domains. And if I take this domain out, I shine a light on this. We know that for azobenzene, it will deform. So there will be a so-called spontaneous deformation or eigenstrain, or in this case, let's call it photostrain, right? So this guy, let's say this guy here expands, this guy also expands. Now, imagine that they are in a matrix or in the material. So this guy now expands, but then there must be a finite scale of elastic field, stress or strain field that affects this guy, right? So vice versa, this V1 also affects V0. So there's really this kind of elastic interaction between these different domains or molecules in this solid, right? When you have a photoreaction. So if we write this material as an isotropic homogeneous linear inelastic material just in our elasticity, you can write the elastic energy. You can actually solve this elastic energy analytically. That's what we did. This is the result. This is the analytical result in the infinitely periodic supercell. So it has three parts in the end. So the total elastic energy, you have a self-interaction part, and then there's a non-trivial interaction part, which you can actually write it out in Fourier expansion. And then there's a far field condition. In this case, this is like a boundary condition. Far field, I apply no stress, okay? So if you further take a look at this carefully, this is really a dipole-dipole-like interaction, but just in a higher order of tensor form. Okay, so the interaction here are really dipole-dipole, and we know that dipolar interaction is a long-range interaction. Okay, so this is something interesting. What we did is we embed this model into this Monte Carlo Ising model, and this is the result. So I have a shear photo strain. Basically, if I have a strain here, the strain is a simple shear. Okay. Now, let's still look at this kinetics. So initially, again, I have some random domains, but then slowly you see that I have some very interesting microstructure involving now, and it's called a tweet structure, or you can call it the stripe structure, right? So to record this photostationary or equilibrium state, again, you see you have a very nice first order phase transition. However, in volumetric strain, which means in this previous page, this deformation now is a volumetric expansion or shrink, okay? It's very different. Now, you can see I don't really have a very nicely looking microstructure. In fact, I don't even know what's the shape of that, right? It seems a mess in this case. And also you look at the detail of the curve. So this color represents some elastic modulus. So having the same elastic modulus, let's look at the blue curve. At this at this level of light intensity, my whole system already flipped. So I finished the photoreaction. However, at the same level of light intensity, I just cannot flip this volumetric system. It can never flip within this range. It's much, much harder to actuate this material than this material. That's what I want to say. So you can actually very nicely explain this as a consequence of, sorry about that, as a consequence of geometric compatibility. So let's recall this so-called Hadamard jump condition in classical linear elasticity. It tells you that if you have two domains with different phases and with different strain fields, then there must exist two vectors that satisfy this equation, which allow these two domains to be compatible with each other. Otherwise, there will be some fracture or dislocation, discontinuity across this boundary. So this equation is really a consequence of the continuity of the displacement field. So the displacement has to be continuous when it crosses the boundary, but the gradient of the displacement, which is the strain, doesn't to be continuous, right? So looking at these two examples, in the shear case, if I put in the number, I can clearly show that given the photo strains in the two domains are actually compatible. You can actually find these vectors to satisfy this equation. So they can largely ameliorate or reduce the elastic energy you input during this phase transition. So this phase transition of material really involves very minimum elastic energy in this case, right? So it's easier. But if you have a volumetric photo strain, mathematically you can prove you cannot find any existing n across these different domains based on the photo strains. That means you have to deform this material, right? To induce the elastic strains that make them compatible. That also means you need to induce large internal stress in the material. That explains why these material, in this case, they're easier to fracture on the illumination. So you see that even you see the fracture really probably doesn't not only come from the defects, but also about the specific molecular shape before and after the photo strain, okay? Now we have this very nice, interesting observation. So let's move on to use this kind of concept to another material, which is this photoactive semicrystalline polymer. So this idea really comes from another collaborator, Professor Ryan Hayward. So what they proposed and did in experiment is, now, if I have these molecules cross-linked, polymerized by azobenzene, okay? And then this trans-azobenzene can form crystals, as we saw before. But now in the polymer, they really form this semicrystalline structure. There are some crystalline domains and there's some amorphous domains. Now, of course, this semicrystalline polymer, if you heat it up, it will melt, right? It will melt to a polymer melt. But more interesting, if you shine a light on this, these trans molecules can still go to cis, and now these crystalline domains, they demonstrated in experiment that they can melt. So you have a light, and this light can induce a melt of the material. So you see that because this is a semicrystalline which stays between an amorphous and a completely crystal structure, it has the potential for both large deformation and large work output. So experimentally, it hasn't been demonstrated yet, but that's the hope, right? So now what we can do is let's understand this again, understand this mesoscale process, right? Using some elasticity model we had before. But in this case, we had a phase field model approach. So we can give the free energy density of this material. And this F1 part is basically a phenomenological Landau free energy. And you can see it has a double well, it actually has a triple well structure because now I have to take care of both trans and cis and also melt and crystal. So I have two other parameters, and trans in the lower energy state, and melt and crystal follows this first order energy well. So these are taken care in this mathematical model. So I can also introduce this long range elastic interaction as I did before, okay? Now I will skip this mathematical formula. Basically, we're using a driven Allen-Kane equation, which is classical, but then we add a photoreaction part, which drives the system away from equilibrium. So that's still the idea. Now, and I can have a little bit more sophisticated photo strain because I now have all different kinds of phases. So again, if I put in the model, you can see that if I give the different values of this photo strain, indeed, I will have different microstructures in my phase field result. So this is, if we understood the previous section, this is nothing too much more special, right? So we already knew this. What's more interesting now is, now let me have a material, and then I record the equilibrium state. So this is what I plot here, and this is these are two curves. One is the crystal ratio, the other is the cis ratio. So cis is the product of my photoreaction, right? So I have a constant light. Now let me just scan my temperature, okay? So you see that at a very low temperature, I have a lot of crystal. I don't have a lot of cis. I have a lot of trans because crystal is formed by trans. Trans is more periodic. Now, if I increase my temperature, these crystals will tend to melt more, right? Will melt more. So I will have less and less crystal. But at the same time, when the crystal melts, I have a photoreaction, so trans becomes cis. So my cis ratio increases until they reach a peak. But now remember, if my temperature is increased too much, I will have a backward thermal relaxation from cis to trans. Now you see that they are in competition with each other. So after reaching a peak, the cis ratio becomes lower and lower. And then there might be a recrystallization because the temperature is still below this melting temperature. So you have a very interesting non-monotonic behavior, but depending on the temperature in this material. So I call it temperature modulated photochemical phase transition. So you can basically use temperature to control your actuation of the material. So indeed, this is some simulation. I just show some interesting result. So initially what we did here is we put some initial nuclei because we don't have a mechanism of generating nuclei. We don't have a statistical mechanism in this model. Now, when the temperature is low, in the end, you can see a large crystal domain here. But when the temperature is high, the crystalline domain don't grow too large. Okay, so this is just some simulation result we can enjoy. Now, because we have all these different phase transition, of course, we can now plot this phase diagram. So I call it a pseudo phase diagram because remember, we have a driven system, but not a thermodynamics closed system, right? So it's slightly different from classical phase diagrams. Now, it's the difference you can also see from this very weird shape of phase boundary. So what I was talking about is basically this blue arrow. So I have a constant light, I increase the temperature. Initially, it's crystal, but now if I increase further the temperature, it melts, goes to crystal again, melt again. So this is a very interesting observation in our simulation. And I think our collaborators currently trying to observe that in experiment. I think they had some preliminary success, but since I left the group, I don't have further update of this. So now finally, let me, I'm running out of time, but let me talk briefly about photomechanical coupling in liquid crystal elastomer. I think many of the audience are most interested in this part. So this was an experimental observation first discovered by Finkelman and others. So what they had is you have a liquid crystal polymer network. So these are liquid crystal mesogens, and you mix some azobenzene in it, and you shine a light. This material can contract very large deformation, like tens of percent deformation of this strain in this material. So the mechanism is these photoreaction, this kink shape of cis, will kind of disturb or mess up the long range directional order of these liquid crystals. So they shrink, okay? Now, we can understand this. As a matter of fact, there's actually very limited micromechanical model of these materials, especially when the material is undergoing both light and mechanical stress, okay? So we just derive a classical finite deformation framework. You have a reference state, which is in a high temperature isotropic state. And then we have a current state, which is in a room temperature or any temperature nematic state. So what's a little bit different from rubber elasticity is now you have order parameter distribution, which gives you how well these mesogen molecules align with a certain nematic director. And then you have a field of nematic director basically at each element or REV, what is the director, what is the direction of the alignment of these molecules? We can write the free energy. We didn't generate these ourselves, but we learned from giants like Corbett and Warner. And this is an elasticity. I'll show the explicit form in the next page. And then we have a mesogen mixture of these nematic mesogens. And photoisomerization is embedded in this free energy. So as a side, this free energy is not new. But what is new here is this studying the photomechanical deformation under both stress and light, especially polarized light. So we have a simple problem here we want to study. We have a thin sheet. We don't need to worry about the propagation of light in the material. We assume it's pretty thin enough. The light intensity is homogeneous. And then we have a load of a prescribed uniaxial stress, and then I shine a polarized light in a certain direction. In this case, the polarization is along the tensile stress. Okay, it's the same direction. And I want to determine the deformation, but then I also want to determine actually the nematic director in this material. This is not fixed, but this needs to be solved. Okay, so I can write my free energy. I can use a Gaussian chain model by Bladen, Taranjev, and Warner. This is classical liquid crystal elastomer model. If you drop this L term, you can see this is nothing but a new Hooking model. Okay, so this takes care of the anisotropy in the material. And I can also have a Mirosopi model of this mesogen mixture. So this models the mesogen as a long-range interaction molecule mixture with dispersion force, very weak dipole-dipole-like dispersion force. So what Corbett and Warner did based on this model is they introduced this C parameter, which is the concentration of cis. Okay, so they're saying if I shine a light and then there's some product of cis, I reduce the interaction energy of this free energy in this free energy. And this cis concentration can be calculated analytically, assuming there's a first order photoreaction, single molecule reaction. So this is not bad. So in molecular crystal, this reaction depends on the long range interaction, right? But in polymer system, especially a polymer melt, probably all the longer range interaction has been kind of sort of weak and screened by other molecules. So this is not a bad model. Okay, so here's the result. Again, we have a material under a stress, under polarized polarization along with the stress, and then I have the stress is constant, but I increase the light intensity. Okay, these are all equilibrium state, and the vertical axis records my stretches. You can see the representation here. So this is on the right hand side. This is the energy landscape, the free energy landscape. So it's a polar coordinate system. The color is the energy, which doesn't matter too much, but the radial coordinate is the order parameter, whereas the angular coordinate is the angle between the polarization and the stress. Okay, so you can see initially, because I have a horizontal stress, I have global minimum here at a finite order parameter. They're ordered. It's the mesogens are aligned with the stress. So let's focus on this energy landscape. So, but if I increase some light intensity, you see the energy landscape becomes different. And furthermore, after some time, my global minimum becomes here and here. So you see that in the end, at a very large light intensity, relatively large, these mesogens align perpendicular to the stress or to the intensity, to the polarization, right? So if you track this angle, you see initially it's 0, increases and becomes pi over 2. Okay, so it's very interesting from mechanical alignment, because initially it aligns with the mechanical stress, becomes, as I call it, photo alignment, aligns with the polarization, perpendicular to polarization. So if you trace the deformation, initially it aligns with the stress, very large deformation, lambda 1,1 stretch, and then it decreases and becomes shortened, okay? And what's more interesting is in the middle, in this transition period, I have a shear strain. I have a finite shear strain. And what happens in reality, what you can usually observe in this liquid crystal elastomer, is this shear strain can be both positive and negative, or either positive or negative. So in reality, what you can find is because of boundary condition, these positive and negative shear strain can stack to each other and form this so-called this stripe domain microstructures. Okay, so these are all very interesting phenomena we observed using the model. Now, how to explain this? So what I told you is the light tends to align the dematic mesogen perpendicular to the polarization, right? So when I first saw this, I was like, this is very counterintuitive, right? Because dipole force, electric field want to align it along with the electric field, right? But this is really a result from photoreaction. So I call it the photo selection, but I know some people hate that name. So this really from some inspiration from natural selection. So imagine now in the equilibrium state. So you have a forward light and you have backward thermal relaxation, and you just move in equilibrium. It just goes forward and backward, cycles by cycles, right? Now, the forward reaction rate, at least in this model, is assumed to be proportional to the projected light intensity on the nematic director, right? So if they're aligned with each other, the forward reaction is favored, it's the largest. But when they're perpendicular, the forward reaction is the weakest, right? So imagine you have forward and backward. It's like this molecule dies and then revive, dies and revive. In the end, if it wants to survive, just like a virus, right? If it wants to survive, it must stay in the perpendicular direction so it doesn't die that easily, right? So this is the explanation from my side. So and I can tell you this phenomena was observed many times in liquid crystal solution rather than elastomer. It hasn't been observed in a liquid crystal polymer to my knowledge. So this dependence of light polarization can also be seen in this phase diagram. So I'm going to skip that quickly. Basically, we plot a phase diagram of this order parameter, and you can clearly see a critical point and a discontinuity here, which means it's a first order phase transition below the critical point. And if it's perpendicular to each other, the coupling is weaker, so the critical point is higher, okay? So now we just start to think, since you have a first order phase transition, it is possible that you can have some mechanical instability accompanied with this first order phase transition. So what we did is we can still study this sample, this example, and then we increase the light intensity and record the stretch, okay? So at certain point, at a certain temperature and stress, you see that it increases to some peak. And because of the first order phase transition, it snaps. So you see a snap through instability, but it doesn't happen all the time, right? So with a different temperature, it might be a different story. Even with a different stress, it can be a different story. So the stress can actually also suppress this first order phase transition and the snap through. So this is also, you can see it from here, right? The stress, if the stress is too high here, you don't have a first order phase transition, right? So, and I have to say, in reality, this might not happen because in liquid crystal polymer system, this first order phase transition usually becomes a second order like, but you can still expect a very sharp change of deformation close to this region, okay? So then my student and I was like, okay, why don't we play with this and then make use of this, right? Again, we had this idea of using temperature. So what we did is, this is still theoretical modeling. I first load this material. This is a dead load with a given temperature. Let me shine a light on this, and this load can be lifted. And then I have a strain change or stretch change of this material. So this S delta lambda basically represents that specific work output, right? So we can record this. And this also depends on the load. So when the load is small, I have a first order phase transition, which here represented by this discontinuity. But you can see that in these first two cases, when the stress is finite, I have a second order like phase transition again, right? But what's interesting we found is in these two plots, you reach a peak in the middle rather than any of the end, right? So basically, when your temperature is very low, imagine these liquid crystal polymer system or elastomers are very well aligned, and the interaction is larger compared to the thermal fluctuation, right? So they don't really deform or change too much the order because of light, right? And when the temperature is very high, you're already in the very thermally fluctuated isotropic state. Your light actuation also doesn't really change that too much. So there must be some peak in the middle. So that's what we found here. Okay, so we're currently trying to do some experiment to validate this. Now, I apologize, I ran out of some time, but here's just my conclusion. So there's basically, I introduced a lot of, I think there's a lot of interesting phenomena in the mesoscale photomechanical coupling, especially photoreaction and mechanics. So we studied 3 material systems. And they have all different observations, but they are interconnected, right? So semicrystalline polymer kind of stays between a molecular crystal and the liquid crystal elastomer. So you can find the references. They are all published if you want to further know the detail. Happy to talk more. So last but not least, let me acknowledge all my collaborators, my group, my previous team, all my collaborators and funding agency. And I want to give a special acknowledgement to Professor Mark Warner, who passed away during the last Christmas. And he's a emeritus professor from University of Cambridge. He's really the pioneer of this field. And he has this very nicely Bible of liquid crystal elastomers and a lot of interesting papers. Not only this is the first ever paper of optomechanical effect in liquid crystal elastomer. So I'm pretty sure his legacy will stay with us forever. So that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ruobing. Thank you very much for the excellent talk. I think there's many questions for you. So please ask a question now. Jing.
Hi, Ruobing. And thank you for the talk, and thank Bao Hong for calling me up. I was messed up with the morning time, and yeah, almost missed your wonderful talk. I have one question about you show this azobenzene is shining light can change its molecular orientation. I'm wondering, since you're forming an elastomer, there must be some other linker molecules. So what is the role of those linker molecules? What is their molecular structure? What is their length of the molecule? Does it matter at all, or it's just purely based on the azobenzene?
Thank you. I almost omitted all of these, right? So just make the things less messier. There's a lot of I think the parameter space in these materials are just infinite. So first of all, I think viscoelasticity is a huge effect by polymers, by different interactions, which I actually neglected. So in terms of specific molecules, usually in a liquid crystal polymer, there's a backbone molecule, polymer molecule. So it can be silicone, it can be carbon-carbon based. And then there's nowadays in modern systems, there's a very well-known system by Yakaki from University of CU Denver using the so-called two-step polymerization. So they use the micro-adhesion between a carbon acrylate and a thiol. So C and S. So then there's some spacer, so-called spacer molecules between these liquid crystal molecules. I think basically you want to tune the melting temperature, right, or glass transition temperature, because that's also why sometimes people have different classification. There's so-called liquid crystal elastomer, which is actually a melt, and liquid crystal polymers, usually it's a glassy polymer. So, and there's also other, and now we were talking about semicrystalline polymers. That's yet another structure. So these are all depending on this very specific molecular chemistry and structure of these materials. I would say that this is something, actually, I think my student is here. this is something that we are currently very actively working on, but we haven't made too much progress. So it is, I want to say it is completely unclear how these molecular structures, even from the polymer physics point of view, right? Not only the chemistry, the molecular shape, but from the polymer physics point of view, how these affect the mechanical property. It is, I think it's almost completely unclear. So this will require some very fundamental work combining theory and experiment. This is very different from the current stage of hydrogel, for example, and the rubber, where you have some model polymers such as polyacrylamide. Many of us are working on that. It's pretty clear. There are some problems, but it's pretty clear. You have some concentration, I can give you the modulus, strength and toughness. But in liquid crystal elastomer, it's nearly completely unclear. Cross-link density, for example, if you do two-stage polymerization, what kind of cross-link density are you talking about, right? So that's a great question. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the answer. I may have a follow-up question, but if no one asks more questions, I'll just ask my question. So this is a very interesting material, and I can see a lot of potentials using it for different application scenarios. But I checked, the isobenzene is kind of toxic to the environment and to human beings. Is there any other alternatives that you guys are using, or is potentially good for applications?
So we haven't. I honestly speaking, our lab hasn't even started experimentally investigating isobenzene. We're still in the mostly mechanics and thermal mechanics of LCE itself. So well, I hope we can make progress soon. So there's but from my previous collaborators and the field, there's always new molecules in this field. So and then in terms of biological application, I think there will be some, depending on the application. I think the more another question I would ask is before that, why do we need to use liquid crystal elastomer, right? And azobenzene and liquid crystal elastomer for biomedical applications. I think for biomedical application, my opinion is possibly hydrogel is a better candidate. But on the other hand, when I was in the hydrogel field in my PhD, I always ask, why do we want to use hydrogel as robotics, right? So I think for robotics, LCE and shape morphing structure, LCE is probably, in many cases, a better candidate. Yeah. And also I have to mention many biological molecules are liquid crystals. So it is hopeful, I think.
That's right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Gene.
Oh, hi, Robbie. I'm delighted to see you have the plenty of the research progress. So my question is, what's the typical modulus or stiffness of the liquid crystal elastomer? And what's the usually for the stretch or strain regime for these materials?
Okay, so you ask exactly one question from our reviewer, and I think, of course, you can tune that. Like as I said, not many really fundamental systematic studies, but typically when you follow the recipe, I'm trying to remember the modulus is on the order of megapascal. So it's a relatively stiff compared to many gels, right? Then strength you can imagine a little bit. I forgot the data, but stretchability can be large, can be if it's an LCE, you can have maybe 5 or 6 times or even larger. That's not a problem. Yeah. Modulus, I believe, is tunable, but viscoelasticity can be something muddy if the cross-link density is too low. But typically, it's on the order around megapascal, so it's slightly higher than many hydrogels. Yeah.
Since I know you have lots of the pioneering work about the fatigue of the hydrogels, and the liquid crystal elastomer both have the liquid crystal molecules and the polymer crosslinks. So do you have some comment about the fatigue of the liquid crystal elastomers?
Yeah, I'm probably, for fatigue of LCE, I'm probably not the right person. My comment is, I know that Professor Li Huajin at UCLA, she has an NSF project of this, and specifically fracture and fatigue of liquid crystal elastomers. And Professor Shengqiang Cai had some, actually, I think the first work, pioneer work in fracture and fatigue of LCEs. I remember he had, well, you can refer to, he had one iMechanica journal club on this. He had a few papers, and recently he had just had a paper coming out last week on a double network tough LCE using, I think, using polyurethane and LCE network. Yeah.
Thank you, Ruobing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Xudong had a question. Let me read it. I learned a lot from mesobenzene liquids. Could you comment about the difference between the semicrystalline phase in the azobenzene LCP and the polydomain state in the LCE used by Yakaki in terms of the rewriting down the free energy function of LCE? The Frank elasticity is describing the gradient of the LCE is important. How about this term in the LCP you mentioned in your talk? Thank you, Xudong. I think that's a deep question. First, about the semicrystalline phase and the polydomain. I think they're different. So, but it's similar to the fundamental difference between, you know, a liquid crystal versus a crystal, right? So polydomain is a liquid crystal phase, whereas semicrystalline, or actually the crystalline domains in the semicrystalline polymer, that's really the crystalline phase. So it's just the fundamental difference between crystals and liquid crystals. I think the difference comes from the interaction parameter or energy interaction force compared to thermal energy, right? So in crystal, that interaction is probably much larger. So in terms of Frank elasticity, that's very interesting because so that depends on the system. In semicrystalline polymer, we haven't studied that. Primarily we didn't consider that, but in LCEs, yes, of course, you know, many people consider that already, and in this work we didn't because in that JMPS work we didn't, because we really want to simplify the model and focus on the main phenomena. And you can see that as a piecewise homogeneous deformation than information, okay? What you can do is you can have a full-scale simulation, including Frank elasticity, which actually regulates mathematically. If you go through the mathematical problem, that actually regulates the stripe domains. Otherwise, if you run the simulation, you don't. The problem is mathematically weakly posed. Okay, so the Frank elasticity just works as interfacial energy in that case. The main conclusion should be the same. So there's a very nice work by Professor Bhattacharya, my postdoc advisor, and Dr. And Mr. Hao Zhou in Caltech, he used Frank elasticity in that modeling. I think they had a JMPS paper recently, and they had a Science Advanced paper by collaborating with Urayama in Kyoto on this LCEs under biaxial stretches. So they have a full field simulation on the using this. So it's that's the same idea. So I'm currently working with some one of my undergrad students. I think he's online here now. Hopefully, if we can use the similar process, including Frank elasticity, to also model this photomechanical system. Yeah, I hope that answered the question.
Ten has a question.
Sure, thanks, Baohu. Yeah, thanks, Ruobing, for the very nice talk. I'm not working on LCE. I wanted to ask a slightly different question. And I think that you show the fundamental mechanism. You have a bistable molecular, and we also know that sometimes we have some molecular model, like even either full atomic scale or like Cost-Green model for the molecular. That can be some spring and bond and angle spring. I think. Do you think it's possible or it's interesting to enlarge your molecular structure to the larger structure, like the meta structure? You get inspiration from your molecular structure and interaction to design some new bistable, multi-stable meta structure. Maybe you can get some higher energy efficiency transition something. I'm working on the multi-stable structure, so that's why I ask you about the structure level, not the material level. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Teng. Of course, you guys have a lot of bistable, you know, right? Double well, whatever, infinite wells. So, but what I am trying to imagine that. But what about the actuation mechanism you are foreseeing? Still light or not necessarily?
Yeah, I don't know. Just ask in general. It's like you already have some kind of template in the molecular level, whether you can scale up and yeah, no matter the stimuli. If light is better, right? You can also have other stimuli just to understand the structure. And
I think one idea that actually not only me but many people had. I actually talked to quite a few different people. They had the same idea. I think Xudong also, he just had a very nice paper in PNS related to this idea using magnetic. So now imagine you have an icing-like lattice and you have some interaction, and imagine you can use magnetic field that independently control these different spins, macroscopically structured spins. And then many interesting phenomena you can foresee, right? Based on comparing the Ising model with your macroscopic structure metamaterial. And even you can play with different macroscopic shapes and the structures, like you said, spring and rods. Of course, you want to, I don't know, you may or may want to have some fluctuation. In this case, maybe not thermal, that's not enough, but I don't know, probably some fluctuation that makes things more interesting. I remember it's even before COVID, quite a few different people I talked to, they have similar ideas, and I think they even had some preliminary work. So I think that's a very interesting structure, and I haven't seen. I don't think any of them published anything, you know, or had any solid thing except that Xudong had a paper. So yeah, but that's what I personally found very interesting, a very interesting structure.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? So, Ruobing, I have a general question about this talk. So I like this question. You find this missing part between this micro and the macro states. So I wonder, how do you figure out and find this problem?
I think it's, well, first of all, it was kind of given by my advisor, so that's the short answer. So but I think this is a great question. So this project was founded by ONR initially, Muri. So multi-university, the head PI is Professor Ryan Hayward. So of course they had a call interested in using light to move materials. That's the story. So then you have this goal. You find out fundamental questions in this, right? But then the question I received, one of the problems I received when I first got to Caltech, given by my advisor, one of the 4 or 5 questions I received is, now it seems like he asked me, it seems like you have a very nice molecular energy landscape or path, just like what I've shown, the double well and electronic structure. And then on the other hand, almost all the people are working on some phenomenological model, you know, modeling light as temperature or using geometry. You have some nice beam bending. But the question is, what's really happening, right? In the material, it's unclear. So that's one question he asked. So then I was like, okay. So I found a very nice paper by Professor Warner and Corbett on PRL about this. The paper was very nice, giving the free energy, and but the paper at the same time was unclear to me about how to play with mechanical stress in it with that, because that they're from physics. They probably don't care about the stress tensor, right? So then you know the story. So I came from my previous group, and we all know the huge effect of mechanical stress on these materials. So that kind of gave rise to this idea, and then just slowly we just talk to different collaborators. Even you see, we don't really collaborate with names on each other's papers, but we really talk to each other quite frequently, and then we got this idea. In the end, then one of the conclusion is there's something interesting and not clear in the middle. So so that's what I took away when I sort of finished my postdoc. So that's why that's why I made this name. I'm saying there's something in my motivation. I in the end I made this. So I think that serves, in the end I found that serves a strong motivation. But at the beginning, they originated from simple questions. I think very simple questions. Yeah.
Thank you. I really like this talk.
Thank you.
Hi, Ruobing. Hello.
Yeah.
Thank you for the wonderful talk. Actually, I may have two small questions to seek your expertise answer. So you mentioned, this is a photoresponsive polymer, so it can absorb the UV light to trigger the reaction. So of course, it has decent amount of light absorption. So I was wondering, do you have idea what is the level of this kind of light photo absorption coefficient? Because it may influence the potential, scale the size for practical application. If the light absorption is high enough, maybe you have to limit it to very thin size or small size.
Yeah, that is a great question. So one thing about so first off, before that, about the light intensity, that's not that bad. The light intensity is about probably at most a few hundreds milliwatt per centimeter square. So but in terms of the light absorption in the material, that's really a problem. So that's why you see all of these demonstrations that beam bending. Basically, the decay length in the material is probably on the order of micrometer, no more than millimeter. So that gives an opportunity where you can really play with very fine, small feature size structure, micro robot. But the question is, how do you absorb? How do you solve this? So I think this comes from this can largely come from new molecular designs. So for example, there's one kind of new molecules, photomolecules, which is called negative photochromes. So as a reference, azobenzene is a positive photochrome, which means if it absorbs light and change, it cannot absorb light anymore. So it stops the light for further propagation. But negative photochrome is it absorbs light, it becomes transparent, and it promotes light to further penetrate. So it's ongoing work. A lot of people are working on this in especially polymer chemistry. So I think it's very promising. So so that's why for us, for the future experiment, I really want to focus or promote clean experiments to help us understanding mechanical behavior and coupling. So by clean, probably thin materials, allowing full penetration, no need to worry about beam bending, these kind of effects in this case, because we're really interested in the fundamental constitutive relationship. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So maybe I have another question related to practical application because really interesting material. So it seems in your theory and demonstration, you start with a polydomain. So it is isotropic with a stress to align the messaging. But some in practical application, LCE are usually programmed into a monodomain state to realize two-way reversible shape actuation. So I was wondering when we use the cross-linking strategy, either by two-way or other, processing technique, we can align the messaging in advance. So it seems we need a kind of stress, internal stress to stabilize this kind of monodomain or the messaging. So in your system, it seems the stress the phenomena is very sensitive to stress. So do you think for practical application, we can use the pre-programmed monodomain state, that's to say with decent amount of stress inside? Do you still observe this interesting phenomena for practical application?
Yeah, thank you. Obviously you're in the field. So just first clarification. We in our model we considered for the liquid crystal elastomer that constitutive modeling for work in JMPS, we considered homogeneous deformation. So that's a monodomain nematic. Polydomain, it's more complicated in simulation and modeling. So, but yes, you're right. I think this is one idea I mentioned to my student the end of last year. So what about using internal stress and stretch to control the actuation pattern or behavior of a more sophisticated structural material, right? And yes, I think on the other hand, the two-step polymerization method, this is kind of the opportunity that's given by this two-step polymerization. On the other hand, it's a little bit annoying that you have to, if you want to form a monodomain in that method, you have to give a mechanical stretch, right? So and it's so sensitive to that mechanical stretch. So I'm always trying to see if there's new method in the field that can use other method which gives you a monodomain nematic elastomer in the room temperature where you have minimum memory, whatever memory in the polymer, right? So I think both Professor Tim White and Shu Yang have have newer methods, which I think are hopeful to help achieve these. But I think we definitely need to, the community definitely need to talk more because different people have different need. For us in mechanics, this is just very important. But I don't think for material chemists and many other people, they care to this much detail in mechanical stress, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, but yes, you exactly asked the same the challenging question. Yeah, and it's a good one. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Wonderful talk.
Ting, you want to say something to finish this?
Are you calling me, Bahong? Yeah. So first, I want to thank Robbie for coming today and gave us a talk. And I hope you all enjoyed his talk. And I also appreciate you all come here today. So we're almost ending this webinar, but I hope you can keep this conversation and reach out to Robbie after the webinar. And welcome to join our Slack channel and follow our Twitter and WeChat account so you can receive future updates. And also we will share the recorded YouTube video link there. Finally, thanks again, and I hope everyone have a good weekend.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thank
bye.
you, Ruobing.
Thank you, Robin.
All right, see you in the future.
Bye.
Bye.